Building confidence and influence. These are the two things that almost every designer wants to get better at. And something that's really helped Tim and I is experimentation. Firstly, to introduce myself, my name is Vivian. I'm a product designer that's really interested in human behavior and how design can influence that. Most of my working hours are spent working on a growth team. This is Tim. He tells me he's been legally designing since COVID and loves clean lines, smooth curves, and strategy games. We've both been designers on Jira for 4 years, and throughout this time, we've seen Atlassian shift to a focus to experimentation, which has hugely helped us improve our craft. Before we dive into this, I'll pass over to Tim to do an acknowledgement of country.
Yeah, so I would love to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're on today. So that's the Woi Wurrung people and the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. We'd like to thank you for welcoming us onto this sacred land. This is a land that's given all of us so much, and it really asks nothing from us. So thank you from us, and we'd also like to pay our respects to all Indigenous elders, past and present. To get things started, Viv and I were curious about your thoughts on a question that we were asking ourselves not too long ago. We were recently redesigning this menu, and we were debating whether we should include icons or not. So, really quickly, just to get a feel of the room, who reckons it should have icons? Hands up. Okay. What about without icons? What about if you don't give a shit at all and you think it's absolutely useless? Right. So the reason we wanted to ask you this question is because we truly don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. It is an example of a decision that we all have to make as designers at some point in our career. And that decision is inherently a subjective one. If you had have asked me about a year ago to solve this conundrum, icons, no icons, I probably would have said, let's go to the users. Let's start some user testing. Let's ask them. Something kind of stops me now. And it's a realization that if we're all thinking and feeling that subjective choice between icons or no icons, how can you ask users the same question? They're going to tell you the exact same thing. It's going to be a divided room, and you're going to end up with a product that is subjectively built. And this leads us to what we're discussing today, experimentation. Viv and I have come to really appreciate experimentation because it seeks to eliminate this subjectivity. It also allows us to do a few more other things at Atlassian.
I want us all to imagine an ideal design project. Does it look a little something like this? I remember when I was studying at uni, all of our projects revolved around the design double diamond. In fact, Tim loved it so much he had it stuck up on his mirror and he treated it like the gospel. But unfortunately, when we started working, we had this rude awakening that projects weren't always this structured or linear. This is something that we're always going to face as designers, and at Atlassian, we have competing interests from engineers, product, other designers, and also our leaders. One group might have concerns about drifting from a pattern library, while others are concerned about technical implementation. And we always have those stakeholders who seem to only care about moving business metrics. The one thing that won't change, though, is that designers will always be expected to bring all of this together into a piece of art while still addressing our business metrics. Luckily, we have a solution to this, and that's experimentation. This is also known as A/B testing. But what do we mean by experimentation in the context of product design? So think back to high school, those questions that you might have done like, do white candles burn faster than colored candles? We're asking similar questions, but in the context of which of our designs are more effective. For us, leaning into this culture of experimentation and collecting data helps us back our design decisions and influence stakeholders.
So I think it's a good time to take us through one of the experiments that we ran. And let's go back to the thing we spoke about just a few minutes ago. Now, we asked you icons or no icons, but this was just a question that we were throwing around, sparring. It wasn't actually the experiment. Prior to the experiment, the menu looked a little bit like this. Let's all take in how shit that looks. It's crowded, it's uninformative, and frankly, if you can tell me what I'm meant to be doing in this menu, I'll eat my hat out in the hallway. As well as this, we had some corporate patrons of ours add a nice little upsell section to the bottom of the menu. Something we needed to design around. What we were curious about was how this menu was affecting our users. Did they love it? Did they hate it? Was it just Viv and I sitting in our ivory tower saying it was bad? Or were they actually getting their jobs done in it? All in all, we had a bunch of questions about this menu. However, questions don't make experiments any more than, throwing a rock in the field builds you a wall. And this is where one of the quirks of experimentation presents itself, something that goes contrary to what we learnt. And it's solutionizing is actually encouraged when you're experimenting. It's about moving quick. It's about leveraging your design principles, and it's about backing yourself, because there's actually no such thing as a failed experiment. That's a misnomer. There's just learnings for the next experiment, which you might fail, and then another experiment, and the circle continues. With this in mind, we didn't want to rock the boat too much with this. We wanted to change a few things, just shuffle a few things around, make it a bit sexier, right? That's our job. We moved the groups of actions into smaller groups based around those users' core jobs to be done. We also wanted to break up the UI. We wanted to make it more scannable, clearer. As well as this, that nice little upsell section, I think deserved its own section where users would clearly know that this is an upsell. It's not something that's in the product. So that's an example of how we kind of conducted an experiment, how we solutionized. What's next?
What's next is the hypothesis. Let's refresh our brains a little bit. A hypothesis is a statement to test the impact of your design changes. The best time to write a hypothesis is once you know your solution type. So this is coming after you've identified the problem area. A typical hypothesis structure that we use at Atlassian looks a little something like this. Firstly, we start with the if-we statement, and this is where we state our solution. And for those of you taking photos of this, after all these slides, we'll have all of them not transparent text, so you can take a photo then. So firstly, for this example of the menu, it's if we add structure to the menu. Next, it's your then statement, which is what you think will happen with your design change. So then users will be able to find what they need easier. Next, we have our because statement, and this is where we're getting into the why we think these changes will happen. So because of this structure, a more streamlined menu reduces complexity and improves user task completion. Lastly, it's our success metrics. So we will succeed if. Our success metrics here is we wanted to see click events in the menu increase by 10% and also see support tickets decrease by 3%. A common question that Tim and I get asked is, do designers have to come up with these numbers and how do we do it? Well, the answer is we don't have to do this part. At Atlassian, we work with product and engineering who'll do a whole lot of maths to come up with these numbers. There are some designers who do like to dig into the numbers as well, so it'll depend a lot on your organization.
So now we've got all the ingredients. They're simmering away in the pot, and you're going to have to wait. Like any good dish, it takes time. We recommend 2 weeks at a minimum. However, the longer you let something stew, the tastier it becomes. Obviously, it's all about your appetite for scope and your business's appetite for scope. No one wants to be running experiments for a year. Now, what tends to happen once you wait is you get some results. And at Atlassian, we call them sharp results. Pretty much because in every single experiment we've done, someone gets cut. Always. So, take it back to the beginning again. How did this experiment go? Were we talking out of our ass? Did it do well? We were kind of talking out of our ass. It could have been better. And this is a little bit of a sharp cut. So Viv mentioned that we wanted to increase the click events by 10%. 3.4 is not 10, unfortunately, no matter how you spin it. The secondary metrics were a bit nicer. They were a bit more calmer. We decreased support tickets by about, 15%, which is amazing. However, this is not a metric to hang our hat on. Any person who has their wits about data will tell you anything can reduce support tickets. We're definitely going to claim it when we go to our stakeholders, but we know deep down, this is a nice, not a great metric. However, the final metric that we were measuring was the upsell section. And luckily for us, we were right. Viv and I have a job for the next year, and we did really well in this. We pumped the clicks for that section. And I think we also helped our users. We weren't kind of fucking them. We weren't trying to hide the fact that it was an upsell. We were telling them, it made it clearer, and I like to think it made it more appealing. So all jokes aside, what do we learn by doing this? We have the numbers, but numbers are just numbers. We need to infer things from the numbers. The first one I think is fairly self-evident. The upsell section works. We're going to go forward with it. Secondly, we're not screwing our customers over by having this menu, which is a great thing. If we had increased support tickets, alarm bells are going to go off. Thirdly, and this is where the menu only negligibly increases interaction by click events. So if we double click on this metric in particular, what does it mean? We didn't hit our desired number. It's fairly evident that when you measure the wrong things in an experiment, you're likely to fail that experiment. And this was a huge learning for us. Our primary metric should not have been about clicks. We were trying to make the menu more scannable, not more clickable. So we were the problem here. And once again, we're getting cut. So now that we have our learnings, what's next?
Now we have our learnings, our experiment is over. But if we did all the work and no one knew we did all the work, did we really do the work? So this is where post-analysis comes in, which is essentially a written document which we're using to share with our stakeholders our learnings and also how our experiment impacted business metrics. So a typical structure we use for post-analysis goes a little something like this. Firstly, we're saying what happened in our experiment. This is where we'll attach screenshots of what happened before our design change and after our design change, our hypothesis and our problem area. Next, it's sharing, did our results work? And remember, there's absolutely no shame in saying that your experiment didn't work. Actually, about 80% of experiments industry-wide will fail. Next, we have to go into why did it work or why didn't it work? And this goes into your learnings and your reflections on the experiment. And lastly, the most important part is your next steps. Typical next steps for an experiment that worked is rolling out to 100% and fixing some of those paper cuts. And if your experiment failed, typical next steps are either unshipping it or doing another iteration and applying those learnings you learned from the first experiment. And there we have it. That's how a typical experiment goes, and we live and we learn. So we showed you a really simple experiment, but we can actually use experiments for other purposes. Tim, what's another example?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. We measured something that was super minor. It was low investment. Every man and his dog is going to give us the keys to test whether we can fix a menu. But bigger investments are often scarier for experiments and scarier for people to want to jump in. And Viv and I have got actually a pretty good story for you all, I think. And it came off the back of a lot of user requests. And frankly, the feature we wanted to implement was something that is just a modern design expectation. It's threaded comments. We only just introduced that in Jira. Let's let that sit for a second. Now, the fact that it was highly requested, yet a huge technical investment, meant that there were nervous energies from the Jira leadership. They didn't want to go here unless there was really a lot of data backing it up. There was a lot of inertia to move. Instead of going the traditional route, Viv and I were screaming for the hills, and they gave us the project. So we started to go into it. We wanted to push them over the line for release. Due to the fact that the design solution was fairly self-evident, it just required a few tweaks to fit our use case. Viv and I left that to some other designers, and we got to work on the hypothesis, specifically the success metrics. This was a super difficult one compared to the previous because when you're introducing a new feature, data likes to hallucinate. Data likes to tell you that you're 1,000% more effective. And that's just not true. If you're comparing something new to something that doesn't exist, you're never going to have true data. So we actually chose a really, really conservative success metric. We wanted to see comments increase by 1.5%, but only on work items that already had comments on them. The results weren't quite what we expected.
Firstly, we found that threaded comments actually improve reply time by 1.5 hours, which was a huge surprising win and not something that we had captured in our success metrics or our goals. This was likely due to the fact that replying brought in teammates faster because you're at mentioning them through those replies. This then increased our active users by 11,000, which was a huge win as this was one of Atlassian's main business goals. But lastly, the catch was that we didn't actually increase total comments, which meant that we didn't actually meet our success metrics. Was this experiment a fail? Well, no, actually. Because of our surprising positive metrics, we concluded that this experiment was still a success. And in our post-analysis document that I mentioned before, we recommended that threaded comments still rolls out to 100% of users and that we invest in months of effort into building out this feature properly. Because we ran this experiment, it meant that there were no surprises after spending months and months building this feature. By the time this rolled out, we already knew not to expect that it will increase total comments. And that's the beauty of experimentation, and this is an insight that we wouldn't have been able to get from simply just interviewing users.
So, before we completely wrap up, Viv and I have a little bit of a confession to make. We really want to walk the walk with experimentation. We don't want to talk. We don't want to get up here and preach to you. And we're not selling a course, don't worry. We've actually got, at the other end of this QR code, there is a single multiple choice question. And we've been running an experiment this entire talk on you all. I'm not going to tell you what it is first. Please commit. If you don't commit, don't worry. I can't see anyone's faces clearly. And at the end of that, there are 4 simple questions. Or 4 simple answers, I should say. We want to know what was most memorable during this talk. Straight after that, I'll give 3 Mississippis and then I'll take away the QR in my head. It's not working? Working? Not working? 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 Okay. I'll have a chat to my technical team about the... So, I'll have a chat now. The experiment was this. We were curious about what was most memorable about our talk. But more than that, Viv and I were having a conversation 2 weeks ago as we were kind of writing this talk. And we were talking about why isn't there more auditory cues in software? We have it on our phone. I game a lot. It's on games. But in software, we don't jig people's memories. And I'm not quite sure why. So I'm sure you would have noticed there was a little jingle that played. And we wanted to know if that would affect your memory. Would that jingle on one of our points prompt you in some unconscious way to go there? And looks like we were right, because the one we played was on measuring the wrong thing can lead to failed experiments.
And there we have it. Experiment, learn, and influence. Thank you.
Thanks.